You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
You're listening to Making Tracks, Reaction Chat. Breaking down the latest in Star Wars programming. Here are your hosts, Mark Mulcaster and Mark Newbold.
Hello and welcome back to Making Tracks Reaction Chat, brought to you by those ruffians over at FanthaTracks.com. Chapters 5 and 6 of Maul, Shadow Lord, dropped a short while ago, and I'm excited to spend a few minutes with my good friend and Making Tracks co-host Mark Newbold to chat through our initial thoughts and reactions to this week's episodes. But of course, this goes without saying, this is your spoiler warning, because if you haven't seen chapters 5 and 6 of Maul, Shadow Lord, then you probably want to pause the podcast right now, go and watch the episodes, and then come back and jump right back in. So, let's have a brief recap as to where we are. This is chapter 5 out of 10 chapters, I believe, so that means we are halfway through the series. Last week, we saw Devon and Maul dance around, with Maul trying to push Devon beyond her Jedi training by questioning everything she has been taught. Maul's approach was far more confrontational than she was used to, with the aim of breaking her resilience on the doctrine. Maul also had time to decapitate one of the heads of the Pike Syndicate, taking him one step closer to his goals of expansion and domination of the underworld. Meanwhile, through a tip provided by the Jedi, Lieutenant Brandon Lawson has a confrontation involving law enforcement and Maul's underworld forces, as well as some fantastic 2-on-1 lightsaber combat. The police prove outmatched and control of the situation quickly slips away. At the same time, Maul hints more closely at a larger shared enemy, suggesting his manipulation of Devon serves a broader goal. Outgunned and outmatched leaves Two Boots no other option than to request help from the Empire, which then leads us to this week's instalment, Chapter 5, directed by Saul Ruiz and Tatiana Drury-Carvan, and written by Jennifer Corbett, and Chapter 6, Night of the Hunted, directed by Stuart Lee and written by Christopher Post. Now, Mark, I could be being a little bit biased because I do play in a heavy metal band. However, all these chapter titles sound like heavy metal song names to me. But Mark, what did you make of these two episodes?
Oh, these are two really good episodes. Not that the previous four weren't very good episodes, but it feels like the tension's really ramping up now. Now the Empire's come to Janix, and you've got that beautiful visual of a Star Destroyer hovering over the city, which always looks amazing. Maul is sort of sitting back a little bit in these episodes, it feels, and sort of waiting for the play to come to him. So, as we move into it, you see the Empire come in, Lieutenant Blake, the sort of the lead Imperial, moving in. You see the sort of subjugation of Janix very quickly. The Empire's everywhere, which is a really impressive visual to see. And it's really well played the way they show it in quite sort of quick fire shots to see how quickly they take it. And all the time, just like in Rogue One, you've got a Star Destroyer sitting over the city. So that's very impressive.
Well, it's just that, like that first kind of shot, isn't it, where you've got the city, but it's basically been engulfed by the shadow of the Star Destroyer, and so it's like the Empire and the Star Destroyer is just eclipsing all natural light, which kind of, I guess, is a very good kind of similarly for what the Empire is going to do, like its stranglehold on this planet. Because I mean, I think we all know, and that's the kind of the dramatic irony about this, is that we know that once the Empire is on a planet, they're not just going to like up sticks and move out just because they've captured Darth Maul or he's moved on to another planet.
No, totally no. That's it. I mean, once they're there, I mean, we saw it in Andor, but they knew what they wanted out of Gorman in Andor. Yeah. They knew what they were there for.
Had a purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, but you think if the Empire and certain aspects and elements and sections of the Empire rock up on the planet, then they're probably also sending out the sort of people we wouldn't see in the TV show. They'll send out geology teams. They'll send out people like that to start looking around and digging around and go, has this planet got, I don't know, calcite? Or has this planet got kyber? Or has this planet got something that we can use as a resource? So why would they leave? They're there. Yeah. They can't be kicked out unless they want to leave. And you would assume that they would check for, I mean, we're still post Order 66, so they'll be checking for Jedi. They'll be checking for insurgencies. They'll be checking for geological things. There could be an instability politically they could manipulate and make use of. So why would they leave?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and ultimately, basically, it's just accelerating the takeover of the planet by the fact that they can come in and just say, well, look, you clearly can't control the lawlessness on your planet by yourself, so we're going to have to, as the Empire, as the good guys in all this, we're looking out for you guys.
That's it. Peace and stability across the Empire. Yeah,
exactly. So that's exactly what it is, and that's the thing, is that you see it very earlier on in this episode, is that literally straight away as the stormtroopers kind of start descending into and branching out into the streets, they're stopping everybody, asking for the scan docs and identification of that, and luckily Devon and Master Decky are kind of they can kind of like bypass all that and kind of slip away into the shadows, which is good. But I mean, this is the whole thing, isn't it? It's that, like, I think this episode, of nothing else, it has a really nice, it introduces that different dynamic that whereas for the first 4 episodes, very much, yes, the Empire's always been something on the periphery, but now this is like it's this weird kind of triangle. So it creates different like alliances going forward, and also the presence itself kind of very much creates this dynamic that I think we were. I don't necessarily know if we were expecting this kind of dynamic to happen from what we've seen in chapters 1 to 4.
True. And also we know, I mean, in terms of that dynamic, we know that Maul has, and always did until his end, an issue with Sidious because he was cast aside. I mean, he was chopped in half, so you can understand. It's not like you found him burnt up next to a lava pool like Anakin was found. He was chopped in half, so he was gone. So the fact that Maul had the guts and will, or whatever you want to call it, and just came from the right race of sort of dark magic that could bring him back was probably not something even the great manipulator Palpatine considered. I wouldn't think he would have expected that. But then we discussed this on maybe a previous episode of Reaction Chat, that Maul was the right apprentice for that era, and Dooku was the right apprentice for his era, and then Vader was the right apprentice for the Imperial era. So he had no purpose for Maul, really. But Maul's going to struggle to get over that because all he ever saw and all he ever focused on was serving his master. So with the Empire turning up, and as we learned last week, the episode with Devon where he says we're fighting the same enemy, and as Daki says in this one, we might be fighting the same enemy, but that doesn't make us allies. So there's some really interesting dynamics there. You can see how Devon can be tempted, but you can also see how Maul, as much as Maul can be rattled, would be rattled by the presence of the Empire, because ultimately that's the embodiment of the Emperor's will, isn't it? The Empire turning up over a planet.
Yeah, and it's overwhelming force. Jedi Master and the Padawan, they can quite easily, or far more easily, slip through Imperial kind of blockades and patrols and stuff. But then if you've got like a slightly larger crew like Maul's got with Rook Cast and the others, then it makes it harder to do that, because that's more people, more likely to kind of make mistakes.
I mean, to that point, you see that in this, skipping ahead a bit, you see that in this episode where Daki does the Jedi mind trick, the classic Jedi mind trick, and you think, oh, great, he's in the Jedi mind trick, and you think they're just going to walk on. And then the next guy comes along who didn't have the mind trick done on him and goes, why are you letting those guys go?
Yeah.
I don't think we've seen it quite like that before, but it makes all the sense.
It does, and that's it, because like you think about the classic scene from A New Hope, there's 4 stormtroopers there, and that's it. So they're all being influenced. But in that situation, it kind of answers a question that I've always had. Is like, actually, what kind of then does happen if somebody questions that or sees it, but then the other person's like, oh yeah, no, that's why I let them through, like running through the underground and stuff on the central line. So it's like, I mean, I would have taken the Jubilee myself personally.
Of course, I'd take the Northern line.
Yeah, exactly.
Hello, I'm Ahmed Best, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
It's nice that we're kind of seeing all these different kind of urbanized kind of like environments and running through them and stuff. And, all the texture in each one is fantastic.
Janix is beautiful to look at, isn't it? But that's a great point.
Really
in that
interesting.
We've not seen a lot of urban places in Star Wars until quite recently. Skeleton Crew, we saw it, and, bits in Mando and Grogu. But we're starting to see more of where people live rather than where people fight and die, which is interesting.
The distinction between earthbound environments and what we're seeing on Janix was closer than maybe it could have been. It feels more like just futuristic sci-fi than it does feel like you know,
like a Mega Tokyo or something.
Yeah, exactly. And funnily enough, I mentioned about like Skeleton Crew because again, it's that whole thing of like it's a suburban environment, but it's like, well, that's just kind of like the nature of what it is. I mean, I don't know how much really, you know, you could creatively change it whereby people then don't connect necessarily so much with the environment, because that's the thing, isn't it? It's kind of in this instance where what hits home is the fact that like actually this could be your city, this could be your town that this happens, rather than just like, you know, some galaxy far away.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is another big metropolis like we've seen. It's not Coruscant, which is a whole planet on multiple levels. You know, I mean, how many levels down do you go on Coruscant? You know, you just see the top of a mountain and that's all you see of anything natural. But there's other worlds that are going to have elements of that. Again, Hosnian Prime, we saw in Force Awakens, there's places like that. I mean, Skeleton Crew was... it was the often used thing. Skeleton Crew was the Goonies, wasn't it? But it was also E.T. a little bit, and it's the suburbs. You see the end of E.T. when they're riding out before E.T. gets on the ship. They're going through the housing estate. You know, Skeleton Crew is kind of that. So we're seeing that. You see the school and you see the roads into the town. Beautifully done, I thought. And here, you know, Janix, as we've said before, is so well designed. And going back to the sort of the plot, you know, you've got the Imperials have come in. They've taken hold, they've taken control. Two Boots is as proud as punch because he's following protocol. He thinks this is the greatest thing ever. Fairly quickly learns and realises, hey, it's not such a good thing. Anyway, he has to literally take his boots off. What did you make of when they took Lieutenant Kleiss away, the captain, and she doesn't come back? And you realise fairly quickly she ain't ever coming back.
Well, she's really the first, can we say, like casualty of the Imperial occupation. When you think about it, was it Lieutenant Blake?
Blake is the Imperial that comes in, the snaky guy,
who's got like the texture on his face was like I was mesmerized. I mean, just like it's one of those things that always draws me to like cinematography is when people can kind of really show the lines and the wrinkles and the craggly bits in a person's face. And so I was you know, like even like with kind of like, I guess you say like liver spots or something on his cheeks and stuff. You know, definitely doesn't probably have the best diet, I'd imagine, even though he's like, you know, Rafe thin. But you know, she kind of answers for Brander's subterfuge, really, because really he's hiding stuff back. Like, you know, she even mentions, doesn't she, about, well, it's not like these guys are Jedi or something, and you know, he's got that like guilty look. I mean, I guess what it's doing is it's really putting him in a difficult situation. He's now the captain, but also he's got to reconcile the guilt of the fact that he's basically kind of caused her death. Slightly later on, we get to see the fact that he gets taken into interrogation. You can understand now why that she probably didn't come back, because Marek's there to turn the screws on.
And it's interesting that she, as the chief, gets interrogated. She was quite cool and calm. You know, she hands the blaster over. She's not, you know, she's not making any fuss. She's not resisting. She just goes willingly to answer the questions. They don't like the answers. And it's probably an Imperial tactic that you would do what they did to her, just to put everyone on notice and shake them up a bit.
That's it. It's like, you know, she's the most senior person there, so therefore she's the one who has to ultimately take responsibility. Yeah. And it's I guess also, you know, whereas we're kind of used to, as viewers, we're kind of used to the brutality of what the Empire does. We see it, you know, as soon as there's any kind of ineptitude, that's it. Like, you know, you get choked, you get blasted or something. So, like, you know, it's good to remind us that actually not everybody knows this. And also, we're only 1 year, you know, into the Empire. And so even though Brander seems to have some kind of inclination of actually like what the Empire is, and that's one thing that I'm quite curious about, is because he seems to be quite switched on to that subject, why he thinks that.
And it makes you wonder how much his wife tells him, because obviously they've separated. We do see Riley, his son, and his wife speak on the holo, you know, and she's at work, so she can only do and say so much. But it's a great point. You wonder, one, what caused her to leave and work for the Empire? Was she always Imperial? Was it a job she was offered? What's the story there? And as you say, how much does he know about what she does? She might be, you know, she might just be a pen pusher. We don't know.
Yeah, well, this is, I mean, I was looking at her uniform. That was the first thing. I was like, well, let's look at actually what, you know, she's wearing. So she's definitely wearing some kind of Imperial uniform. Like it's like in an officer's uniform, but there's no rank there. She hasn't got a rank badge, she hasn't got the code cylinders and that, but it's still very kind of, you know, formal and tucked in and that. So she's probably, I wouldn't be surprised she's some form of administrator or something. Yeah. But like, you know, even during that conversation with Riley, you know, she talks him for a little bit, but then very quickly she surreptitiously looks over her shoulder and she's like, you know, I can't talk about this right now. So wouldn't it be cool if it actually turns out to be like one of the first rebel moles or something called defectors, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's just the fact that she's obviously very much aware that, like, you know, she doesn't have the autonomy to be able to just kind of take phone calls in the office like some people can.
And she is a little bit like, oh, what's your dad done now? You know, there's a little bit of that. What's he done? Oh, what, not again. What's he done now? You know, so there was an element of that. I mean, Marok, when he is interrogating Branda, it's interesting that, as we say, Klyce doesn't make it, and she probably knew practically nothing.
Yeah.
We know that Branda knows more, but he's somehow, even with Marok, is able to keep a lid on it. But also, maybe Marok not doing anything to Branda, maybe there's a link to the fact that Maul and Branda were face to face, and Maul didn't kill him like he killed everybody else. He sort of looked at him and let him go. So I don't know what the play is there quite. You know, whether it's just not worth its time, whether he sees something there. We don't know. So there's maybe elements there.
I think it's a fact that Klyce didn't know. So either one of two things, she was outrightly defending and protecting him, therefore not giving away any information, or actually Marok kind of goes, well, yeah, I can sense that he knows a lot more than he's letting on.
Yeah.
So rather,
but maybe just got to let it play out.
Totally, yeah. Because, well, you know, if he's the only link to Maul, then why would you do away with him? Exactly, cut him off from that. And it's quite nice because you had that shot, didn't you, of when he's in the interrogation room and he looks down, you can see like the fingernail scratches, like deep gouges in the desk, and that, which the fact that he noticed it would suggest that probably they weren't there like last week, and this was something that, you know, that's what happened when Klyce was being put under the screws or something.
There's a couple of things to mention. We see, as you say, Riley speaks to his mom. She tells him just to do what you're told. So there's very much that toe the line, don't question authority. Obviously, Branda's an authority figure, but he has that maverick cop, John McClane vibe about him. So he's not going to follow the rules necessarily. So that's obviously dramatically is going to make more sense. Spybot is trying to find where everybody is. And Spybot manages to finally find Devon and Daki as they're sort of staying away from everyone. And they basically end up at Riley and Branda's apartment because they're looking for somewhere to hide. They know they can't get off world now. Everything's locked down. So it's quite interesting that you've brought those characters together now, which again just plays to what you've just said about Marok playing the long game of letting these characters just get out there and do their thing, because it is a bit of a game of chess at this point of the galaxy, isn't it? You know, the Inquisitors are out doing their job, that any Jedi survivors are going to be keeping their heads down. No one's brave enough to put their heads above the parapet because they'd be nullified instantly. It really is a delicate time, isn't it?
Delicate time for them, yeah. And also, like, Master Decky's injured as well. And we don't necessarily know how injured he is. But when he jumps down from hiding from stormtroopers when we're in the subway and back, like he's, you know, clutching his ribs and stuff like that. And Devon wasn't aware until that point. So I'd imagine that might be something that could come into play later on if he has to face off against Maul again or Marok, you know. So probably doesn't spell rainbows and happiness and sunshine for our Jedi Master Decky at the end of a series.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
When do you think Ducky has his big fight, which feels like it's going to come? I don't see him making it out the end of season 1, but if he does, great. But I don't see it. He feels like a wounded duck at the moment. Do you think he'll meet his end at the blade of Maul? Do you think he'll meet his end at the blade of Marok? Because we know he survives because he ends up in Ahsoka. Or fart in the wind, as we used to call him. Or do we think he will meet his end maybe? If Devon gets turned, you think his apprentice turns on master, that kind of thing?
I see. I mean, she's really conflicted, isn't she? She's saying, you can tell that she's repeating and quoting what Maul's kind of saying, or at least the sentiments of what he's saying about fact, you know, she's frustrated that they're really powerful, but yeah, they have to kind of hide in the shadows. And Decky's kind of saying, well, look, those are Maul's words, Matt, so you kind of got to be really mindful. You know, Maul, in that short period of time, had a dramatic influence on Devon. But to me, I don't think it will be her who finishes them off. I think it will be Marok. When we watched Ahsoka, neither of us were amazingly enthralled or like blown away by that character. And it kind of feels like a slightly Luke Cage thing, isn't it? Like, okay, so you think you know this character, but actually, this dude is actually pretty kick-ass about it. He's quite, you know, formidable. You know, we still don't really know a huge amount about him. I'm assuming that's partly a ranking thing as well, rather than just like whether it may be turned or recruited that. But I think he's probably quite formidable. So I would imagine that, well,
Yeah, I mean, it wrecks their apartment, obviously.
Yeah.
They Riley and Brandon pile out the window, climb to the roof whilst the Jedi are fighting Marok. That's a great battle as well. Some of the visuals, the lightsaber moves, and just the look of it, the sound of it as well. It's fantastic. I read the other day that apparently David Collins had said that in Maul's saber sounds are Sam Witwer screams. They mixed in Witwer screaming as Maul into the sound of the blade. I kind of love that. It feels like a Horcrux. Yeah. It's got a Potter vibe to it in a weird way, isn't it? It's got that like the soul of the wielder is kind of in the weapon. So that's very cool. So you get them. So they split up. So Devon and Riley go off, and Daki and Branda are sort of holding the fort. It's a great sequence on the roof. There's a really great firefight up there. They all sort of make their way out until they get into a vehicle, and I think it's a Lati, and hit the skies and fly away. I love the kinetic feel of that as well. It really moved. You know, you saw, because the camera was fixed, so you saw the vehicle go whooping past the camera, whereas normally the camera's panning with it, and you don't quite feel the speed. But you sort of, the camera was fixed, it sort of whoomp, and off they went, like belting away. Really like that. That was a cool move. Yeah,
I mean, for a whole chase, I mean, no, we haven't really spoken too much about music, but it very much gave me that Attack of the Clones Chase for Coruscant kind of vibe, didn't it, really?
Big time.
And and you've kind of got Devon who's in there kind of going, that's all right, I've got this, and Brandon Babat's kind of going, what the hell's going on? You know, her Jedi reactions are far better than the Imperial pilots, so they crash into just about everything, don't they?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's a nice, solid chase, but that whole kind of first, or really it's almost like about 10 minutes all said and done, from that lightsaber duel in their apartment all the way through is just non-stop wall-to-wall action.
Oh, yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's when we see Deki with a lightsaber can't match Marok, but seems to be able to get for better of him when he pulls the lights down on him. Kind of, I was like, you know, they look just like a load of like strip lights. Not quite sure by the fact that he was taken out quite so quickly and easily with that. But, you know, it gives him enough chance to escape anyway.
Yeah, he's smart enough to know when to back away. I mean, obviously, as you said, he's injured, clearly some sort of injury. And he's not in the full flush of youth. So, you know, taking on Marok could probably, you know, well, we don't know his history. It could be Star Wars, isn't it? He could be 500 years old for all we know, really. But you know, he's definitely at a disadvantage, so it's a smart thing to do. When they get away, I mean, we do step back to Two Boots, who I thought, quite sadly, that was the moment for me where the penny dropped for him, even though he's kind of figuring it out. When Blake says, you know, what are you wearing them for? They're not standard issue. Take those boots off. That's his uniqueness gone there, isn't it? He's just another one. You see a room full of 50 of these droids.
Loads of them, yeah.
You know, and he's just another one. But with the boots on, he's Two Boots. Take the boots away, he's not Two Boots, is he?
No, he's just TOBTS, wherever it is.
That's it. So I thought that was an interesting little sequence. So we head off to the casino to where we reunite with Sul, who's Branda's old contact. He'd saved her in the past. She'd saved him in the past. Definitely a connection there. And it did feel for a little while that maybe she was going to turn him over, but she didn't. She completely did what she said she was going to do. Big firefights. You know, she kicks off with the stormtrooper. Macquarie stormtroopers, by the way, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
I love the fact that they've gone down that route. And, you know, there's this whole thing giving them time to escape and get out of there, hit the elevators and leave the casino. It's impressive stuff. The visuals are great. The fights are great. The characters are engaging. It's not falling short in music, as you've just mentioned. It's not falling short in any element, really, is it, so far?
No, I don't think so. It's a very fun, action-packed and well-paced kind of like narrative. I mean, like I said, we had like 10 minutes of the first chase, and there's a little bit of a breather, and then the Imperials are back on them, and like you said, they end up in the casino and stuff. But it all works. Like, and aesthetically, we've seen loads of casinos now in Star Wars, and it looks really cool.
Yeah,
to see that. But also to kind of then play into that gangster kind of vibe where, they would have like a back entrance exit with a lift and that, so they can get down to their own car without going through the casino, probably so they don't get hassled by anybody, but also then they can slip out should the authorities come in. That's a very interesting relationship between the two of them. But I hope that we then could get more in the next kind of couple of episodes, which would be good. Because, yeah, there's definitely some things that haven't been said. And you kind of wonder, like what Riley's thinking, because he's like, who is this broad? If you're, like, the son of a police officer, you just assume, oh, yeah, my dad's kind of like, the virtue of, like, law-abiding and all that. But then why would he be mixing with people who run casinos and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, he's clearly that hinted at the past that maybe made the mom leave.
Possibly, yeah.
That could be something there. And so you see that element. And also Devon and Riley, similar ages, you think. But she's very much like, oh, you just played games when you were a kid. What a nice, privileged life you've had. So she's a little bit... Whereas most Jedi Padawans are like, I'm proud to be a Padawan. Look at the life I'm one of the chosen ones, basically. And she seems a little bit sort of dismissive of him.
Yeah, well, she kind of said, my upbringing or my life's a lot different.
Very
to yours,
different,
It's like, they're in his bedroom, aren't they, at one point? And, he's doing that kind of typical young teenage boy kind of thing of, like, cleaning up the bedroom also just to impress a girl. That's just it. But you also wonder, like, she's probably not so forthcoming because, like, she doesn't trust him.
No.
B, she's got to remember that, it's different times, so you can't just kind of go, oh, yeah, I'm a Jedi, by the way. And, survival is not going to be very long if that was the way that you kind of let people know who you were and that. So
definitely not. We do sort of the big climatic fight of this episode, the 6th episode, is that sequence on the train, which was some of the fight stuff in that was incredible. When Marok turns up, Devon holds him off, Riley gets on the train, and off they go at speed. And they've got that great with the light, so you really get the kinetic feel of the speed of the train, which is brilliant. It really reminded me of the first Mission Impossible in the Eurotunnel.
But also that there's a couple of times in this scene and it's the last shot really of Maul, and he's kind of got those lights behind him, and it's kind of hypnotic. It's kind of like there's a hypnotic kind of vibe about it.
It felt a bit Naboo to me as well. The lights on Naboo, the lighting, the way it was all structured. There's just a vibe about that to me as well.
Yes. Although I thought more Bespin, in the tunnel where Luke's kind of walking through between the two, like the carbon freezer and the next room that he meets. But there you go. So that's it's just classic Star Wars kind of lighting and architecture. It's the lodgings, and the fact that he's elongated as well.
Completely.
So it gives it like a hyperspace kind of vibe.
Yes. It's very cleverly designed. Like I said, the lighting as well. That's another thing we didn't mention earlier. The lighting in this is supreme, I think. I mean, it really makes the show. It's given it such an aesthetic that's unique to anything else. But doesn't feel out of place. It doesn't feel out of place in Star Wars.
100%. Well, I mean, I was watching it. If you have, from the first episode, it kind of it jumped out to me very, very quickly that in HDR you've got all the kind of like the lightsabers and the blasters that are the brightest elements in the scene and fire and stuff. And then like everything else, the headlights and all the other kind of practical lighting is lower down. So it makes those lightsabers really pop and really stand out and really kind of create a vibrancy and separation between the image, which I thought was really interesting. It's a nice way of kind of dealing with that. You would imagine, lightsaber is probably no brighter than like your average kind of downlight or fluorescent tube and stuff like that. So the way it's been lit and it's been shot and that, it kind of really creates that extra separation, which I thought was really cool.
I'm Gareth Edwards, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks Radio.
We end that fight sequence with Devon cutting the chain holding the carriages together. And all of a sudden, Marok's vehicle just stops, his carriage stops, and they whiz away. At the end of the episode, well, obviously, Devon turns to Maul with a saber ready because she's not sure what's quite going to happen there. Maul deactivates his saber. So there's an interesting balance there. But also at the end, you see Marok kneeling before a hologram. It looks like a cloak. So straight away, you've got to think, is he talking to Vader? Is he talking to the Emperor? Is he talking to... Who's he talking to? We don't know who he's talking to. It's beautifully classic Star Wars cliffhanger-y element to that. And, we won't find out till next week, but it was tantalising for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you want to speculate? Do you want to guess?
I think it's Snoot Snoot from Star Wars. Gurinden? That's what I think it is. I think he's reporting back to Snoot Snoot. That's my guess. What about yourself? Chief Jawa?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but he says my lord, so definitely a Jawa then. But hey, we only have the week to find out, so you know what that means, everybody. Join us next week for another episode of Reaction Chat. So thank you very much. But of course, if you want to listen to more of me and him, you can do. We are going to be back very, 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 very soon on an episode of Making Tracks, and we want some listeners' questions and some feedback. So if you've got any feedback or questions about Maul or anything else that's going on in Star Wars at the moment, and trust me, that's a hell of a lot, let us know, and Mr. Newbold can tell you how you can do it.
Yes, I can. And people, here's how you can do it.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show Good Morning Tatooine goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's me done for this episode, mate.
Excellent. So that is it. Thank you very much for joining us for Reaction Chats, and for everybody else for listening. May the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.